The dragons of Sindara had never trusted humans. For 30 long years since the colonists first arrived on this remote frontier world, the massive winged creatures kept to the scorched peaks, watching from a safe distance with eyes that burned like molten gold. They were ancient beings older than any human civilization, and they had seen enough to know that trust was a dangerous thing to give away freely. Keeper of Embers, the eldest dragon, remembered the betrayal as if it had happened yesterday. The memory burned in his mind like a wound that refused to heal. When the humans first arrived, they had come with promises. Sweet words about cooperation and respect. They spoke of sharing the world, of learning from each other, of building something new together. The dragons, cautious but hopeful, had listened. They had shown the humans the sacred hatching grounds where their young came into the world, places of power and ancient magic that kept the planet's natural rhythms in balance. Within a single year, everything changed. Mining equipment appeared on the mountainside like metal parasites. The machines carved deep into the rock, their motors humming day and night, never stopping, never resting. The sacred grounds trembled. The crystals that had grown for thousands of years cracked and shattered under the relentless drilling. The humans had taken the dragons' trust and crushed it beneath their machines. The dragons retreated higher into the peaks where the air was thin and cold, where humans couldn't easily follow. Their distrust hardened like cooled lava, becoming an absolute law passed down to every new generation. No human could be trusted. Not ever. Not for any reason. At the base of those same mountains, 8-year-old Lily Carter didn't understand any of this history. She didn't know about the broken promises or the wounded sacred grounds. All she knew was that magnificent creatures lived in those peaks, and for some reason, everyone was afraid of them. Lily spent countless evenings on her family's porch, sitting on the weathered wooden steps with her chin in her hands, watching the distant shapes glide between the mountain peaks. The dragons were beautiful even from miles away. Sometimes when the sun was setting, their scales caught the light and blazed like flying stars. She wondered what their voices sounded like. She wondered if they had families like humans did, if they laughed or played or told stories to their children. "Lily, get away from that railing," her father, Jack Carter, called out for what must have been the 100th time. He was a terraforming engineer, the kind of man who solved problems with equations and careful planning. He didn't like unknowns, and the dragons were the biggest unknown on Sindara. "Stay away from those mountains." "That's not a suggestion, that's an order." "But Dad, they're just animals," Lily protested, though she didn't really believe that. The dragons were too graceful, too deliberate in their movements to be simple animals. "They're not just animals and you know it," Jack said firmly. "They're intelligent, they're dangerous, and they want nothing to do with us. No one who goes up there comes back. Do you understand me?" Lily nodded, but her eyes drifted back to the mountains. Her mother, Rachel, was gentler in her warnings but equally firm. She sat down beside Lily on the porch steps that evening, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "I know you're curious, sweetheart, but sometimes different species just can't get along. They have their world up there and we have ours down here. That's just how it is." "But why?" Lily asked. "If they're intelligent, we should be able to talk to them. We should be able to be friends." Rachel sighed, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "Life isn't that simple, honey. Sometimes there's too much history, too much hurt between groups. The dragons have their reasons for not trusting us." "What reasons?" Lily pressed. Rachel exchanged a glance with Jack, who had joined them on the porch. "That's complicated adult stuff," she finally said. "Just promise me you'll stay away from the mountains." But Lily's curiosity burned brighter than any warning her parents could give. Every night she dreamed of dragons. Every day she found her eyes drawn to those distant peaks. The dragons were magnificent, powerful, intelligent beings. She couldn't understand why two species that could both think and feel and build couldn't find some common ground to stand on together. The settlement had been built with high fences and warning systems pointed toward the mountains. Everyone treated the peaks like enemy territory. But Lily saw something else when she looked up at those heights. She saw possibility. She saw mystery. She saw a question that desperately needed an answer. She would learn that answer soon enough, though not in any way she could have imagined. Sometimes the biggest changes in history start with the smallest, most innocent actions. And sometimes a child's curiosity can crack open doors that fear and anger had sealed shut for decades. The storm came without warning, the way dangerous things often do on frontier worlds. One moment the sky was clear and blue, the next it turned black as midnight even though it was barely past noon. Lily had been playing in the yard behind her family's house, tossing a ball for her pet to chase. The small creature looked like a cross between a rabbit and a fox, with soft gray fur and oversized ears. She'd named him Pepper because of the black speckles on his nose. When the first crack of lightning split the sky, Pepper's ears flattened against his head. His whole body went rigid with fear. Then another bolt struck, closer this time, and Pepper bolted like his tail was on fire. "Pepper, no. Come back." Lily shouted, but the terrified animal was already gone, racing toward the open terrain beyond the settlement. Without thinking, without grabbing a jacket or telling her parents, Lily ran after him. Her small legs pumped as fast as they could carry her, following the gray blur of fur that was quickly disappearing into the distance. She ran past the settlement boundary without even noticing the markers. She ran past the warning signs with their bright red letters. She ran into the foothills where jagged volcanic rock rose from the ground like broken teeth, sharp and menacing. All she could think about was Pepper, alone and scared in the coming storm. The storm intensified with terrifying speed. Thunder didn't just sound in the distance, it shook the ground beneath her feet like the world itself was coming apart. Rain began to fall, but it wasn't normal rain. The drops were ice cold and came down so hard they stung her skin. Wind whipped around her, making it hard to keep her balance on the uneven ground. "Pepper!" she screamed again, but her voice was lost in the howling wind. She couldn't see him anymore. She couldn't see much of anything through the sheets of rain. That's when her communicator sparked. The small device on her wrist, the one that let her parents track her location and talk to her from anywhere, suddenly got hot. Lily yelped and tried to pull it off, but before she could, it sparked again and went completely dead. The electromagnetic pulses from the storm had fried it. Her hair stood up from the static electricity in the air, making her look like she'd been shocked. Lily realized with growing horror that she was lost. She couldn't see the settlement anymore through the storm. She couldn't call for help. She didn't even know which direction was home. The temperature was dropping fast, turning the rain into sleet that cut at her face and hands. Her thin shirt and pants were soaked through, offering no protection at all. She was cold. She was alone. And darkness was falling fast. Lily stumbled forward, hoping to find any kind of shelter from the storm. The volcanic rocks cut her hands as she climbed over them, leaving small trails of blood that the rain washed away immediately. Her teeth were chattering so hard she thought they might crack. Every breath hurt in her chest. Then she saw it. A dark opening in the mountainside. A cave. Lily didn't care if it was safe or what might be inside. She needed to get out of the storm before she froze to death. She stumbled through the entrance and collapsed onto the stone floor inside. The floor was warm. That was the first thing she noticed. Volcanic rock held heat from deep in the planet, and this cave was wonderfully, blessedly warm compared to the frozen hell outside. Lily lay there for a long moment, too exhausted to move another step, her whole body shaking from cold and fear and exhaustion. That's when she heard them. Soft chirping sounds in the darkness deeper in the cave. Not bird sounds exactly, but something similar. Something that made her freeze despite her exhaustion. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, Lily saw them. 3 dragon hatchlings, barely 2 months old, huddled together in the shadows against the back wall. They were about the size of large dogs, with scales that shimmered even in the low light. Their eyes glowed faintly like small lanterns. Their wings were folded against their bodies, still too small and weak for flight. Lily's first thought should have been terror. These were dragons, the creatures everyone feared. But looking at them, all she saw were babies. Scared babies, alone in a storm, waiting for their mother to come back. They were making those chirping sounds because they were frightened just like she was. The hatchlings turned to look at her. For a long moment, nobody moved. The little dragons tilted their heads, studying this strange creature that had invaded their home. Through their telepathic senses, still developing but already functional, they could feel Lily's emotions. Her terror. Her desperate need for warmth. Her loneliness. Feelings they understood completely. Slowly, cautiously, the largest of the 3 hatchlings approached. It moved carefully, like it wasn't sure what Lily would do. Lily was half delirious from cold, her thoughts fuzzy and slow. She couldn't run even if she wanted to. She was too tired, too cold, too far past her limits. When the warmest hatchling pressed its body against her side, Lily didn't pull away. She couldn't. Instead, acting on pure instinct, she curled around it like she would have curled around Pepper on a cold night. The dragon's body heat seeped into her frozen limbs, the most wonderful feeling she'd ever experienced. The other 2 hatchlings saw this and crept closer. They nestled against her back and legs, wrapping their small bodies around hers. Within minutes, the 4 of them, 3 dragons and 1 human child, were tangled together in a sleeping pile, sharing warmth in the cold mountain night while the storm raged outside. In that moment they weren't different species or ancient enemies. They were just four scared younglings who needed each other to survive. Skyfire Wing returned to her nest at dawn with fresh prey clutched in her powerful claws. She had been hunting through the night, tracking a large mountain goat across the peaks. It had been a successful hunt, and she was eager to feed her hungry babies. But the moment she landed at the entrance to her cave, she dropped the prey instantly. It tumbled down the rocks, forgotten. A human child, sleeping among her babies. For a long moment, Skyfire Wing couldn't process what she was seeing. It was impossible. Humans didn't come this high into the mountains. Humans knew better. And yet there one was, a small female child with dark hair, tangled up with her three hatchlings like she belonged there. Rage flooded through the dragon, white-hot and absolute. This was an invasion. A contamination of her nest. Her sacred space. How dare this human creature violate her home, touch her children? One breath of fire would end this. Just one breath and the threat would be gone, reduced to ash before it could harm her babies. Her muscles tensed. Her throat warmed with the building heat, that ancient fire that lived in every dragon's chest. The temperature in the cave rose several degrees. She took a step forward, her claws scraping against stone, ready to unleash destruction. But then something stopped her cold. Her hatchling's emotional resonance hit her like a physical force. Through the telepathic bond all dragons shared, especially between mother and children, she could feel what they were feeling. And they weren't afraid. They weren't distressed or crying for help. They felt content. Safe. Even protective of the small creature curled between them. This didn't make sense. It went against everything Skyfire Wing knew about humans. They were dangerous. They were destroyers. They couldn't be trusted. Yet her babies, innocent and pure in their judgment, had accepted this one completely. Skyfire Wing crept closer, her massive form casting long shadows across the sleeping pile in the early morning light filtering through the cave entrance. She was enormous compared to them, large enough that one of her feet was bigger than the human child's entire body. Her head alone could have swallowed the child whole. The human child was female, small, fragile in the way all young mammals were. Her clothes were torn and dirty, soaked from the storm. There were small scratches on her hands and face from climbing through the rocks. She looked like she'd been through something terrible. As Skyfire Wing watched, the child shifted in her sleep, and her hand came to rest on one hatchling's scales, right over the warmest spot on his chest. A small smile crossed the child's face, even in sleep. The sight did something to Skyfire Wing's rage. It didn't disappear, but it softened. Became something more like confusion than fury. When Lily woke, the first thing she saw were eyes. Enormous eyes the size of dinner plates, golden like the sun, ancient and powerful and absolutely terrifying. They were less than a foot from her face, watching her with an intensity that made her blood freeze in her veins. She should have screamed. Every instinct in her body told her to scream, to run, to fight. This was an adult dragon. This was death itself staring at her. But somehow the scream wouldn't come. Instead, tears rolled down her cheeks, hot and fast. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, her voice breaking. "I got lost in the storm. I was chasing my pet and I couldn't find my way back and it was so cold and I just needed somewhere warm and I didn't mean to intrude. I'm so sorry. Please? My parents must be so worried about me. They don't know where I am." The words tumbled out in a rush, punctuated by small sobs. Lily wasn't even sure why she was apologizing to a dragon. It probably couldn't understand her. But she felt like she needed to explain, needed this magnificent creature to know she hadn't meant any harm. Skyfire Wing tilted her massive head, studying the child with those ancient eyes. Through her telepathic senses, she could read the truth in the child's heart. There was no malice there. No greed. No plans for conquest or exploitation. Only genuine wonder at seeing a dragon up close. Only fear for her family who must be searching for her. Only real affection for the hatchlings who had kept her alive through the night, who were now pressing closer to her, refusing to leave her side even with their mother returned. The dragon made a decision that would change everything. It went against 3 decades of distrust. It went against every warning the elder dragons had given. But sometimes, rarely, the universe gives you a moment where you can choose a different path than the one you've been walking. Skyfire Wing released a long, low call that echoed through the mountains like a horn blown in the deep places of the earth. It was a summons, one that hadn't been used in 30 years. A call for Keeper of Embers, the eldest, to come and witness something impossible. Then she did something that had never happened in dragon history. She lowered her long, scaled neck and brought her head down to the child's level. The meaning was clear. An invitation. Lily stared at the dragon in disbelief. Was she really being offered a ride? Hold tight, little one, a voice said in Lily's mind, clear as if someone had spoken directly into her ear. It was warm, feminine, powerful. Skyfire Wing's telepathic voice, entering a human mind for the first time in a generation. I'm taking you home. With shaking hands, Lily climbed onto the dragon's back, gripping the ridge of scales along her neck. The hatchlings chirped and launched themselves into clumsy flight, determined to follow. And together, they emerged from the cave into the dawn light, ready to change history. The settlement's alarm sirens wailed like banshees, a sound that everyone had hoped they'd never hear. It meant only one thing: dragons. Armed security personnel rushed to their positions, their boots pounding against the ground. Weapon systems hummed to life, charging up with that high-pitched whine that made your teeth ache. Everyone knew the protocols. Everyone had drilled for this moment. Dragons meant danger. Dragons meant possible death. Rachel Carter was in the kitchen when she heard the sirens. She'd been up all night searching for Lily, calling her name until her voice was raw. The search parties had found nothing. No trace. No sign. And now the sirens were screaming and her daughter was still out there somewhere. She ran outside and looked up at the sky. What she saw made her heart stop completely. A dragon. A massive adult dragon, descending from the sky like a living mountain with wings. Its scales caught the morning light, shimmering with colors that had no names. And on its back, impossibly, was a small figure with dark hair. Lily. Rachel screamed her daughter's name so loud it tore at her throat. She started running toward the dragon without thinking, without caring about the danger. That was her baby up there. Everyone stand down. Jack Carter's voice boomed across the compound, cutting through the chaos. He was a quiet man usually, but when he needed to, his voice could carry like thunder. He'd spotted Lily too, and his engineer's brain had already processed what he was seeing. His daughter was alive. She was unharmed. And she was sitting on that dragon like it was the most natural thing in the world. Stand down. That's my daughter. Do not fire. Security Chief Williams hesitated, his finger near the trigger of the defense cannon. Every instinct screamed at him to fire, to protect the settlement. But that was Jack Carter's kid up there. He slowly powered down his weapon, though his hands shook with the effort of restraining himself. Skyfire Wing landed gently in the center of the compound, her massive claws barely making a sound despite her enormous weight. The three hatchlings tumbled through the air around her, chirping excitedly, still learning how to fly properly. Lily slid down from the dragon's back, her legs wobbly, and immediately ran into her mother's arms. Rachel grabbed her daughter and held her so tight that Lily gasped for air. She was crying, checking Lily all over for injuries, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her hands. Are you okay? Are you hurt? What happened? We were so scared, baby, we thought we'd lost you. I'm okay, Mom, Lily said, hugging her back just as tightly. I'm okay. The dragons saved me. What happened next would be taught in schools across the galaxy for generations to come. The ground shook. Not from an earthquake, but from the impact of something massive landing nearby. Keeper of Embers arrived, the ancient dragon's form so large that he cast a shadow over half the settlement. He was easily twice the size of Skyfire Wing, his scales darkened with age, his eyes holding the weight of centuries. Then his voice entered every human mind simultaneously. It wasn't sound exactly, more like thoughts being placed directly into their heads. The sensation was so unexpected, so overwhelming, that many people fell to their knees, clutching their heads. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like hearing someone speak from inside your own skull. For 30 years, we have watched you wound this world, Keeper of Embers spoke, and his thoughts carried the heavy weight of profound disappointment. Your machines tear into the mountainside without care. Your drills shatter the crystal formations that have regulated this planet's weather patterns for millennia. The storms grow worse with each passing year because you do not understand what you are breaking. The humans stood frozen, listening to accusations they couldn't deny. Many looked ashamed. They'd thought the increasing storms were just natural weather patterns, nothing they could control. Through Lily, who the hatchlings had accidentally imprinted on telepathically during their night together, a bridge began to form. She could feel both sides now, human thoughts and dragon emotions mixing together in her mind. She became a translator not just of words, but of feelings and intentions, helping both species truly understand each other for the first time in 30 years. Rachel Carter, still holding her daughter, suddenly understood. Her engineer's mind was racing, connecting dots she'd never seen before. The electromagnetic readings, she said aloud, her voice filled with dawning horror. The ones we dismissed as background noise from the volcanic activity. They weren't random. Those crystals form a planetary network, don't they? They're regulating the weather, the temperature, the electromagnetic field of the entire planet. And we've been drilling right through them, Jack added, his voice thick with shame. He felt sick to his stomach. They'd been so careful with their environmental impact assessments, or so they thought. But they'd missed this completely. We can fix this. We have to fix this. We can redesign everything, relocate our facilities, work with the planet's natural systems instead of against them. Colony Director Mitchell stepped forward, an older man with gray hair who'd led the settlement since the beginning. His hands were shaking slightly. We'll shut down the mining operations immediately, he said, looking up at Keeper of Embers. We'll repair what we've damaged. But we need your help. We need your knowledge of Sindara's ecosystems, your understanding of how everything connects. Keeper of Embers regarded the humans with those ancient, golden eyes. You would change everything? Restructure your entire colony? Abandon your mining operations that you've spent decades building? All because of what one child's innocence has revealed. Lily, still in her mother's arms but finding her courage, spoke up. Her voice was small but clear in the stunned silence. We made mistakes because we didn't know any better. Now we know. Isn't that what matters? That we learn and try to do better? The Dragon Elder's laughter rumbled through everyone's minds like distant thunder, but it wasn't mocking. It was surprised, almost delighted. A child speaks wisdom that centuries of isolation could not teach us. Perhaps humans are not beyond redemption after all. Perhaps trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. 3 years had passed since that storm-filled night when a lost child changed everything. Sindara had become legend across the galaxy, the impossible world where dragons and humans lived in harmony. Diplomats and scientists came from dozens of worlds to study what everyone had thought could never happen. 11-year-old Lily Carter stood before the Galactic Council, and she wasn't that scared little girl anymore. She'd been officially designated as a speaker, one of the few humans the dragons trusted completely. The title meant she could communicate with both species, bridging the gap between human language and dragon telepathy. Only 5 humans in the entire colony had earned this honor, and Lily was the youngest by far. Beside her, perched on the council chamber's specially reinforced platform, were the 3 hatchlings from that fateful night. Except they weren't hatchlings anymore. They'd grown into magnificent young dragons, each one the size of a small house, their scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. They watched the proceedings with intelligent eyes, occasionally communicating with Lily through their telepathic bond. Ambassador Richardson presented their case to the assembled council. He was a tall man with gray at his temples, someone who'd spent decades in diplomatic service. Sindara offers a model for coexistence that many deemed impossible, he said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. We've learned that true harmony doesn't come from strength or superior technology. It requires something much harder. It requires humility. The council members shifted in their seats. Representatives from a dozen different species watched with varying degrees of skepticism. Everyone knew the reputation of both dragons and humans. Dragons were notoriously isolationist, refusing contact with other species for centuries at a time. Humans were notoriously expansionist, spreading across the galaxy like wildfire, sometimes crushing other cultures in their path. The idea that these 2 species could not just coexist but actually work together defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about both of them. A representative from the Delian Empire, a species that looked like walking crystals, spoke up. With respect, Ambassador, this alliance goes against the fundamental nature of both your species. How do we know this isn't temporary? A fluke that will collapse the moment real disagreements arise. That's when Keeper of Embers spoke. The ancient dragon had traveled to the council specifically for this presentation, something unprecedented in itself. His telepathic voice resonated through the chamber, touching every mind present simultaneously. Even the species who normally communicated through other means could hear him. We believed humans were incapable of restraint, Keeper of Embers said, his mental voice carrying the weight of centuries. We believed they could not show wisdom, could not demonstrate genuine respect for other forms of intelligence. We were wrong, and our error nearly cost us everything. He gestured toward Lily with one massive claw, the movement gentle despite his size. A child taught us something we had forgotten in our isolation. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing vulnerability anyway. This small human woke surrounded by predators who could have killed her with a thought. She could have died from terror alone. Instead, she chose trust. She chose to see my grandchildren as scared youngsters who needed warmth, not as monsters to fear. Lily felt dozens of eyes turned toward her. She took a breath and stepped forward, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Public speaking still made her nervous, but she'd learned that important things were often uncomfortable. "The dragons taught us something just as valuable," Lily said. "Being powerful doesn't mean you have to use that power. Being intelligent doesn't mean building everything you can imagine. Sometimes real wisdom is knowing what not to do, knowing when to stop and listen instead of pushing forward." She activated the holographic display she'd prepared, and images filled the air above the council chamber. Sindara appeared in 3 dimensions, slowly rotating. Human settlements glowed in the valleys, but they looked nothing like typical colonies. They were designed to work with the crystal networks rather than against them, their buildings following the natural energy flows of the planet. Dragons patrolled the skies, their flight patterns creating a living map of weather systems and ecosystem health. In the mountain caves, human and dragon young learned together, playing games that taught both species about each other's ways of thinking. "Our children sleep beside their young now," Lily continued, and the hologram shifted to show exactly that. Human kids and dragon hatchlings curled up together in the nursery caves, completely comfortable with each other. Not because we've forgotten that there are risks. Not because we're naive about our differences. But because we've chosen to build something better than fear. We've chosen to create a future where 2 species who once hated each other can raise their children side by side. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the voting began. One by one each representative cast their vote. When the final tally appeared, Lily felt tears prick her eyes. It was unanimous. Sindara's model of coexistence would be studied, documented, and shared across the galaxy. Other worlds with multiple intelligent species would learn from what they'd built. That evening, Lily stood on her family's porch, the same wooden steps where she'd spent so many nights watching the mountains with longing. But everything was different now. Skyfirewing's 3 children circled overhead, their calls friendly and familiar. They were checking on the settlement's perimeter, something they did every evening as part of the joint security patrols. Her younger brother, 5-year-old Tommy Carter, was already asleep in the nursery caves. He'd been born into this new world and couldn't imagine life any other way. To him, playing with dragon hatchlings was as normal as playing with human kids. Rachel put her arm around Lily's shoulders. "You changed the world, sweetheart. Do you know that?" Lily shook her head, smiling slightly. "I just got lost in a storm and wanted to be warm. The dragons did the hard part. They chose to see me as I really was, not as what they feared I might be." Jack chuckled from his chair, where he was reviewing plans for the new settlement expansion. "You know, sometimes I think the greatest bridges in history are built by accident." "No." Keeper of Ember's voice touched their minds gently. The ancient dragon was perched on his favorite mountain peak above the settlement, silhouetted against the twin moons. "Not accident. The child chose trust over fear in that cave. We chose understanding over isolation. Every bridge requires both sides willing to reach across the gap, willing to be vulnerable, willing to take that first step into the unknown." As the twin moons rose higher over Sindara, lighting a world where 2 species had learned not just to coexist but to thrive together, Lily smiled. She'd been a lost child once, too cold and scared to know she should have been terrified. Now she was living proof that sometimes the smallest acts of trust, made in the darkest moments, can rewrite the future for entire civilizations. The end.